Most keyboardists think that basso continuo is all about the harmony. But really, that's only half the battle. And it's not the half you're struggling with. Let's break you out of your basso continuo struggles. So here's what nobody tells you about learning to play basso continuo. Knowing what the harmonies are, what the figures mean, and being able to actually play them are two totally different skills. Basso continuo is a physical skill. It requires getting the chords into your body, not just knowing what the figures mean mentally. It's all about patterns, about knowing what's likely to come next, how that feels in your hands, and how it feels to transition from one chord to another in your body. The more you play Baroque music, the more you see these patterns over and over again. So they need to become part of who you are, part of your body, part of your hands, not just living up in your mind. These patterns are learned through repetition as well. So the most important part of learning basso continuo is actually how you get between the chords. So the goal really is to get between chords without too much thinking. That's where the struggle comes in for most of us, especially if you're new to basso continuo. So you need to build in chord progression and muscle memory that comes through repetition of common progressions and common patterns. Now, there's a treatise that I really love that will help you do this. It's by Dandrieu. It's a French treatise, French Baroque treatise from, I don't remember exactly the year, but the 1710s, somewhere in there. So late Baroque, but the early side of the late Baroque. What I love about this treatise is that it gives you voicings. It writes out all the voicings. So voicings, remember, are where on the keyboard you are, at your right hand specifically, where the notes are, what order you play them in. That's voicings. The Dandrieu writes those out in a bunch of like non-real extra big figures in this treatise, and goes through a bunch of different common harmonic patterns for the early late Baroque, for the late Baroque period. But that, of course, apply to earlier Baroque music as well. So this Dandrieu treatise, I've created a PDF you'll find down. It's linked down in the description, but it's not just the Dandrieu treatise. It's my realization of all the extra thick numbers that he's put in there. So I'm taking away that hard step of reading the figures that aren't even real. They're like really thick figures. I'll show you, there's a picture on the screen of what that looks like. And those aren't what real figures in real music looks like. That's just Dandrieu's way of telling you what the voicings he would play are. But I've taken that step out of it for you to make it easier to get right to that muscle memory, physical learning part of how to learn basso continuo. And so the PDF of the first several exercises of the Dandrieu that I have realized for you to help you with muscle memory are down in the description below. So grab a copy of that. And that's going to help you a ton. One, start to recognize these harmonic patterns that are common in Baroque music. And two, really, really, really start to get them into your body through repeated practice of these patterns. By the way, if you like this video and you're interested in learning more about basso continuo, please actually like the video as well as subscribe to my channel, where I put out a bunch of content about basso continuo playing, about the harpsichord, and about other early music topics. So after you've worked on the Dandrieu exercises or the special PDF that I have linked below that I've created to help you even get to this muscle memory learning faster, the next thing to do is when you work on your real pieces, the real repertoire, the real Baroque repertoire you're playing, you need to chunk it down into little pieces, split it out, pieces isn't the right word here, little sections of only a few measures, maybe 4 measures, or a phrase is a good chunk usually to work on. And then work on the transitions between chords. Remember, the most important thing for learning basso continuo and getting better and getting it physically into your body, making basso continuo a physical skill, has to do with how you get from one chord to the next. So when you're working on real repertoire, that's exactly what you need to work on. Small chunks where you work on getting from one chord to the next and how that feels. I would start with doing just one chord to the next in your real rep, going back and forth between them. finding the voicings that work for you that are close in the same position. Then I would expand to the whole chunk, or to maybe 3 chords, maybe 4 chords, then work up to your whole chunk. That whole chunk is probably not very long, at most 4-ish measures. But that's the size you want to be working on so you don't get overwhelmed and you practice just like the Dandrieu, but with real music. This repetition of familiar patterns and this working of the transition between one chord and the next. So why am I advocating that you practice this way? Why do I believe that basso continuo is a physical skill more than it is a mental one? Now, it does have a mental aspect. You do have to know what the figures mean before you start practicing the harmonic patterns at all. But once you know what the figures mean, if that's where you stopped, you still can't play basso continuo. I promise you that. And that's likely where you're stuck and likely where you're struggling. So you need to work on bridging the gap from knowing what the figures are in your mind and when you see them on the page, to actually being able to play them in your hands and not just play one at a time, to play a whole group of them, ideally, in the end, a whole piece of them. So this is where the physical aspect comes in. Basso continuo is a physical skill. It requires knowledge. That's the mental part of it. But beyond that, what it actually needs to become real and take it off the page is physical skill. That comes through repetition. That comes through practicing of familiar patterns and common patterns in the Baroque. And that comes through working on the transitions from one chord to another in these ways that we've talked about. Without repetitive practice of chord transitions, moving from one chord to the next, we tend to get stuck in our basso continuo playing. That's where most people have their struggle. Knowing how to read figures is usually less of an issue than actually playing basso continuo from those figures. But if you need help with figures, I've got your back too. So check out my video. You can see it here on the screen. Is this where I'm going to put it? Yes. Check out my video that talks about figures and what they mean. You can see them in your hands, or in my hands actually, in the video. But also grab a copy. I'll link down and below in the description, as well as the PDF I'm putting there of my realizations of some of the Dandrieu exercises. I will also put my figures chart, which is all the most common Baroque figures that appear in real Baroque music and what they actually mean. So a lot of figures, you most likely know this, but a lot of figures have implied notes. For example, 6, the figure doesn't just mean play a 1/6 above the bass. It also implies to play a 1/3 above the bass. This is true for most figures. So if you're not 100% sure of what all the figures mean, and there are some that show up differently in different eras of Baroque music and in different nationalities, different composers sometimes use figures a little bit differently. If you're not 100% sure of what all the figures mean all the time, grab my figures chart down in the description. That will help you out, as well as my video that I made previously about the basso continuo figures, where you can see them in my hands. So now you know how to start practicing basso continuo as a physical skill. Work on repetitive practice with the Dandrieu. That's where I would start. That's what really made a big difference in my own playing many years ago. I sat down, I took a summer, I went through the Dandrieu, I worked on it every day to the point where I could play the whole thing at once. I don't remember how many pages it is, but if you sit down, play the whole thing at once at a pretty fast tempo, it still takes about half an hour. So I worked up to that, and it changed my basso continuo playing. It made basso continuo a physical skill for me. So that's what I want to have happening for you. That's what I want to help you do. Move from this mental element of basso continuo playing to the physical, the very important physical element of basso continuo playing. So that's number 1. Number 2 then is work on real pieces, real Baroque pieces, but chunk them down. Work on the chord transitions, one chord to the next, then work in larger and larger increments, but still small chunks that you're not going to get overwhelmed by. That's how you're going to turn this mental thinking about figures into a physical skill of basso continuo playing. Okay, so now it is time to get to work. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel, hit that little notification bell so you get notified every time I put out a new video. And if you found this video useful or helpful, please give it a like and leave me a comment below. Thanks so much for watching. I can't wait to hear from you and help you more with your basso continuo playing. Bye.